A quiet peace mixed with the morning sunlight spread across the grocery store aisles. This humble market in a modest neighborhood was a regular stop for mothers doing their shopping after dropping their kids off at school. Amber Williams held the hand of her 4-year-old son, Malik, as she carefully examined cereal labels. She wore simple jeans and a gray sweater. Her face bore the tired but proud expression of motherhood. Amber had grown used to shopping in a planned and meticulous way. They lived on a single income, and she prioritized Malik's healthy nutrition. As always, she compared labels, checked for discounts, and made thoughtful choices. Malik, giggling joyfully, reached his small fingers toward the colorful boxes, spreading laughter through the aisle. A sharp, high-pitched voice rang out from the other end of the store. "Seriously? Control your kid. This isn't a playground." Amber turned her head in surprise. The voice belonged to a white woman dressed in expensive-looking clothes, holding a latte cup. Her brows were furrowed, and her eyes were fixed on Amber. Amber couldn't understand why the stranger was behaving this way. The woman's name was Evelyn. Amber had never seen her before, but the contempt and anger in her eyes were all too familiar. It seemed Evelyn was annoyed just because Malik had touched a few boxes, but her reaction went far beyond reason. Instinctively protective, Amber pulled Malik gently behind her and stood taller. "He was just looking," she said in a calm but firm tone. Evelyn let out a mocking laugh. "Looking? He's messing up the shelves. And then people like you play the victim, as usual." Her words began to draw the attention of other shoppers. Amber's skin color seemed to reveal the real root of Evelyn's anger. But Amber knew she had to stay strong for her son. Amber had faced prejudice before, but something about this moment was different. As Evelyn's voice grew louder, the store felt quieter. People turned to watch. Amber felt a pang of isolation, but Malik was right there, looking up at her with eyes silently asking for protection. Above all else, she was focused on his safety and peace. Evelyn stepped closer, invading Amber's personal space. "If you can't control your child, you shouldn't be here. We decent people are trying to shop, not walk through a daycare." Those words sparked a buried anger in Amber, built up over years. But she knew better. Losing control in moments like this only handed over power. She stayed composed. Amber locked eyes with Evelyn. "It would be easy to respond to someone like you, but I want to be a better example for my son," she said steadily. Malik, now half hidden behind her leg, never took his eyes off her. Whatever she said, it would leave an imprint on his young mind. One of the store clerks, a young cashier, began to approach with concern. But a stronger figure emerged. Darnell Thomas, the store manager, strode in from the other end of the aisle. A black man himself, Darnell was no stranger to incidents like this. His face showed he immediately understood what was happening. When Evelyn saw the manager, she rushed to complain. "This woman let her kid run wild. He's touching everything. What about hygiene?" But Darnell didn't respond right away. He looked at Amber, then at Malik, and finally turned to Evelyn. His voice was clear and resolute. "I know exactly what's going on here." Darnell Thomas, the store manager, had dealt with all kinds of customers over the years. But with a single glance, he recognized the roots of Evelyn's behavior: privilege, prejudice, and the habit of misusing perceived authority. Standing beside Amber, he wanted to show his support. "There's nothing unhygienic going on here," he said in a firm voice. "A child looking at packaged goods doesn't hurt anyone." Evelyn was stunned, her pale skin flushed with shame. This was a system she was used to controlling, and suddenly it wasn't working in her favor. Evelyn hesitated for a moment but didn't back down. Rolling her eyes, she snapped again. "So, it's acceptable now for your staff to allow unsupervised children to run wild? I suppose we can all see the standard of this place now." Amber took a deep breath, but Darnell stepped in. "Before you talk about standards, take a look in the mirror. Your attitude toward this child and his mother is both offensive and discriminatory. We don't tolerate this kind of behavior in our store." His words struck a deep chord in Amber. At last, someone was raising their voice for justice. Other customers had begun watching the confrontation. Some had pulled out their phones to record, while others silently offered their support to Amber. She suddenly realized she wasn't alone. Standing next to Darnell didn't just offer physical protection, it was emotional support too. Evelyn, on the other hand, was visibly bothered by the growing attention. She grew increasingly agitated, Are you seriously the manager? How can you defend this kind of disrespect? Darnell responded with even more resolve. I am the manager of this store, and every customer here deserves equal respect, regardless of the color of their skin. Amber knelt down to Malik's level and looked into his eyes. You didn't do anything wrong, she said softly. Malik nodded, his eyes showing a mix of fear and trust. Amber realized this wasn't just a supermarket argument. This was a moment that would shape the values she passed on to her son. Moments like these would be remembered years down the line. Meanwhile, Evelyn continued trying to play the victim, but the atmosphere had shifted. No one stood on her side anymore. Darnell made a decision. Ms. Evelyn, your behavior is disturbing other customers. If you continue making discriminatory remarks and refusing to follow our store policy, I will have to ask you to leave. Evelyn froze. In the world she was used to, she was never the one receiving such warnings. Losing control, she shouted, Are you kicking me out? This is ridiculous. But Darnell stood firm, calm, and composed. This is our respect policy. The choice is yours. A female customer stepped closer to Amber and gently touched her shoulder. We're with you, she said kindly. We run into people like her all the time, but we can't stay silent anymore. Amber thanked her. In moments like these, even small gestures of support felt like a mountain of strength. Malik held his mother's hand tightly, observing the people around him. He looked at her with pride, and Amber felt that, after years of patience and quiet injustice, something meaningful was finally happening. Evelyn was stunned by the wave of support against her. The backing she had assumed would be there never came. Amber, standing tall beside Darnell and the surrounding customers, had shattered her illusion of superiority. This wasn't just a scene in a supermarket, it was a reflection of a society undergoing change. Realizing she could no longer win, Evelyn turned red with anger, stormed toward the exit and muttered, I hope you lose your job. But her words were drowned out by the everyday hum of the store. Darnell turned to Amber. You and your son will always be welcome here. If you ever need anything, we're here for you, he said. Amber absorbed his words through a wave of exhaustion. Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. She was more than just a strong mother. She was a woman who stood firm, who taught, who held her dignity. As she stroked Malik's head, the light in his eyes reflected the pride he had in her. What began as a lonely morning no longer felt so solitary. Other employees had also witnessed the event. A young cashier approached Amber with a warm smile and offered to help. As Amber straightened her cart, Malik reached for a colorful box again. This time, Amber handed it to him. You've earned it today, she said. Malik clutched the box with a proud grip. Amber smiled. Today wasn't just about groceries. It was a lesson in humanity, dignity, and resilience. As they walked toward the exit, a few more customers greeted Amber. Some touched her shoulder, others gave her respectful nods. When she stepped outside, the air felt fresher. The sun still shone, but the warmth inside her was even brighter. Darnell stood at the door, smiling as he watched Amber and Malik leave. He had witnessed a quiet victory. As Amber walked toward her car, Malik quietly climbed into his seat. While fastening her seatbelt, she paused and looked at her son through the rearview mirror. What happened today wasn't just an ordinary incident. It was a powerful life lesson for her son about who he is and what he deserves. Amber had taught him not just how to shop, but how to stand tall with dignity. Before starting the engine, Amber took a deep breath. Her eyes welled up for a moment, but these tears weren't from pain. They came from strength, pride, and a mother's unwavering resilience. Something had shifted inside everyone in that store. Not just Evelyn, but Amber too had crossed a threshold. Staying silent was no longer an option. The number of people who supported Amber as she left the store was greater than she'd imagined. For years, she had felt invisible, but that day she saw the truth. One voice could inspire others. A single person refusing to stay silent could shatter the mirror of an entire system. What happened in that store felt like a small but powerful revolution. Evelyn's scream had vanished into thin air. The sense of entitlement she always relied on had finally met resistance. It was more than a shopping trip. It was the collapse of privilege. Meanwhile, Amber, with the grace and patience she'd carried all her life, had taken her first step against the silence of the system. Nothing would be the same again. As Amber drove off and stopped at a red light, she locked eyes with a woman in the car next to her. The woman nodded in silent solidarity. She had seen everything at the store. Amber took that nod as an affirmation. No one had shouted, no one had raged, yet in that silence a resistance had been born. The city now felt different to her. The events of the day soon found their way to social media. As the footage spread, many people began sharing similar stories. Amber hadn't aimed to become a symbol of protest, but she had become a voice of conscience. People like Evelyn had controlled the narrative for years, but in this new era, people were finally seeing the truth. And to see is the first step toward change. At the end of the day, Darnell listened to the silence inside the now-closed store. What he had done might have been the most important act of his career. He hadn't just stood up for a customer, he had defended justice, equality, and respect. Darnell would never forget Amber's resolve. She wasn't just a shopper, she was a turning point. That night, Malik fell asleep curled up next to his mother. As Amber gently stroked his hair, she thought to herself, there will be more days like this, but we'll grow stronger through each one. The world could be cruel sometimes, but as long as mothers like Amber existed, children would grow up never forgetting who they are, rooted in love and honor. Evelyn might remain angry for a while, but deep down she knew she had lost. The invisible armor that the system had always gifted her had shattered in the face of a mother's determination. Maybe one day she would truly look in the mirror and realize what she'd done. But for now, she was lost in the silence she used to control. For Amber, that day marked a turning point. She had refused to back down in the face of injustice, and she had taught her son the same. Whether in a store, a school, or on the street, they would encounter more people like Evelyn. But now Amber knew every silence could become a scream, and hers could no longer be silenced.